There are 13 different types of tracks in Cubase. Let's find out how to add some and what they are for. Open up the Tracks project. If you look at the top left of the window, you will notice two buttons grouped together. For now, we are only interested in the second one, the all-new Set Up Windows Layout button. Clicking on this reveals the window layout options. By clicking on any one of the empty boxes, we can choose to either hide or reveal different components of the window layout. Over here, there's a button on the left of the layout window that will reveal the inspector. For now, let's toggle this on so that we can see two distinct gray panels on the left side of the screen. The one on the left is where the inspector appears, which we'll see in a second, and the one on the right is where the tracks go. Right-click on the second gray panel and choose Add MIDI Track. Don't worry about this Browse button here. We'll look at that in the next chapter called Track Presets. You can choose how many MIDI tracks to add here. For now, we're going to leave this set at 1. Now click Add Track. You can see that the track appears here, and the information for that track appears over here. This is known as the inspector. Now, let's add an audio track. This time, go to the Project menu and choose Project, Add Track, Audio. You can choose how many audio tracks you would like to add, and you get a choice of whether the track will be mono or multi-channel, right up to 5.1 surround sound. Click Add Track. Let's add a marker track and move it up to the top. Here we can add markers with the Draw tool and jump to them easily by pressing their corresponding numbers on the transport bar. Markers are good for pointing out different sections in our project, like verse, bridge, and chorus. We'll talk more about markers in Level 2 of this series in a chapter called Advanced Markers. Next, add a folder track. Before you do, let's click on the MIDI track. Now add the folder track. As you can see, the folder track was placed below the track we had selected. This is the case for all types of tracks when you add them, except for effects channel tracks and group channel tracks. These tracks are placed at the bottom of your track list, but can later be moved up. You can place tracks in a folder and then close them up. This is useful when you have a lot of tracks and need to keep the drums in one folder, the guitars in another, etc. This can also be extremely useful for orchestral compositions in sorting out the many different sections of the orchestra. Let's draw in some empty parts with the Draw tool. We can color them by clicking on the above color selector when the part is selected. You can also color the track separately by control-clicking on the left side of the track like this. We'll talk more about color later. You can close and open the folder track and still see the audio and MIDI track information underneath. A great preference found under the File menu, Preferences, Editing, Project and Mixer is the Auto Track Color mode. When you make a new track, Cubase will automatically color the track for you. The default works great, but you can choose another selection here. Another good preference is Enlarge Selected Track. Let's turn it on. Now add a few more tracks. We'll shrink them up, and when we select a track, it becomes larger than the other tracks. Let's go back and turn this feature off for now. We can add a ruler track and move it to the top. This allows us to see our timeline in a variety of formats. Now add another one. Have one show seconds and another show time code by right-clicking on the ruler area. Effects channel tracks, group channel tracks, and video tracks are discussed in Level 2 of this series. Instrument tracks are discussed in the video on MIDI recording, and the arranger track is discussed in its own chapter coming up. Transpose track and tempo tracks are talked about in Level 3 of this series, with an advanced tempo track chapter in Level 4. And finally, signature tracks are also talked about in Level 4 of this tutorial series.
Select nothing, mouse over to track.
When you right-click on a track, you can choose to select all events on that track, which is better than trying to select them yourself. You can duplicate the track or remove it, which will delete it. If you want multiple tracks removed, Select them first on the project page and then right-click and choose Remove Selected Track. Track control settings are discussed in the chapter Customization. Automation is discussed in Level 2 of this series, and track presets are discussed in the next chapter. More information on the inspector is also discussed in Level 2 of this series, although we will touch on various items on the inspector throughout this tutorial. Now that should give you a quick introduction on tracks. Now, let's look at track presets.